clients here in the UK. You have almost 400 employees. So are companies like yours and others prepared for a new type of employee that will be digitally native?
Because we already have a virtual working model, I think we are certainly prepared for it. I mean, we do have a large amount of people working for us who demands a flexible working pattern, who demands development opportunities. You know, we have a large amount of millennials already working for us because of the nature of our business. What we do see from interacting with a lot of other businesses is that a lot of that change is going to be driven by their employees. So are they prepared for it? Probably not. I think we don't see social collaboration platforms in place. We don't see a bring your own device policy in place in many cases. But these things are changing because they're having to, because people are turning up with their own laptop and they're demanding an Ethernet cable. And if they're not provided with one, then they will work from the Starbucks down the road. And businesses have no choice but to address that.
Lee, do you notice a lot of difference between large enterprises and small companies in their ability to embrace the employee of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the sort of classic startup mode where people are very task focused, there's no sort of unnecessary bureaucracy, there's no unnecessary meetings, and people just get on with things. They share ambiently, what they're doing, they work out loud, and so there's a higher level of awareness and common purpose in the structure. I think that does stand in contrast to the sort of top-down hierarchies that large companies still continue to use. And I think that that's really the root of the problem. It's not that a big company should be like a startup. A big company should probably be a container for lots and lots of teams which act like startups. There's no one structure for a large corporation that's a magical solution. But I think if they can operate as a platform and as a network and as a group, and then allow much more flexibility and autonomy for individual departments and teams, then they have a chance of succeeding. Because you can do the best, customer service on the outside, you can do the best social media engagement, but it's lipstick on a pig if you don't trace the customer journey all the way back through to the actual product, the actual service, and what happens. And so I think that's, that has to be addressed inside the organization in order to be successful on the outside.
IBM has hired large numbers of millennials. It's made a real commitment to that from a hiring standpoint. Yeah. Are you noticing a difference when it comes in, leaving aside millennial versus other demographic groups, and you can get caught up in putting too many labels on generations, but are your new employees more adaptive to global networking?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've seen the change, and I think for me personally as well, for my role, I've never used social media as much as I have at the moment, but also kind of the internal collaboration and the kind of internal communities and the need for kind of the millennials to feel like they want to share what they're doing at work and kind of their development, and they're constantly writing blogs. We've got people that are writing daily blogs, both internal and external. The way we collaborate, there's a few teams that have set up a kind of WhatsApp group outside of work, but it's a platform for them to engage with their colleagues, which I think isn't something that kind of happened a few years ago. So I think we can definitely see the change in how technology has kind of impacted the way we work. So I think it definitely has changed, and they've brought that in. And I think someone mentioned also a point about kind of the video conferencing. That's even become even more popular, kind of flexible working and kind of working remotely in different locations. There's definitely kind of a need to see that person using a webcam and it kind of collaboration. So I think it has definitely changed.
Lee, like a big difference between your UK clients, for example, and your US clients when it comes to adapting to digitally native employees?
Yeah, huge. I mean, I was saying earlier that we actually work with more people in the US and Israel, but that's possibly because we specialise in a lot of tech companies. The non-tech companies, ironically, are in the UK, and they're very much far behind. We also work with a lot of charities and government organisations, and it's completely different. You can't compare them, and I really embrace what IBM are doing, and it's so refreshing to hear. But it should be that way. And when you compare it to other brands, they're not thinking that way. They don't have the policies in place. They have staff that, it sounds horrible, but perhaps shouldn't be there because they've been there for so long, and they're They cannot adapt. They're technophobes. Everything takes so long. There's so many decisions, and it's very, very frustrating. And so come in and try and help, and you kind of have to pull everything apart and actually start from the beginning. And people struggle to adapt to change, and also there's a big fear. They don't understand. There's not enough education. Well, it's been working so far, so why should we change just because everyone else is doing? So you kind of have to prove to them, and stop the skepticism as well as to why you need to be doing this, so you're not left behind.
In the US, so many companies, top executives seem to be focused on shareholder value. Are you beginning to see a change here, a movement away from that to putting the employee experience at the center of the company?
Well, the employee experience is incredibly important, because if your employee feels like they're part of a team, they're actually going to give more to the team. If there's somebody sat there who says, you do this, you do that, you do the other, you become a robot. You're not using your creative juices, and you're not adding to the team value.
What are you all seeing about the physical workplace of the future, and to what degree is it even required that we become, centered for a period of time in a physical place if we have devices that connect us?
Well, I think for the discernible future, most of us are going to have a physical presence and a digital one. And I think you need to nurture both sides. So to that extent, you need to have a physical organisation and a digital one.
You're copping out here, Martin.
I'd like to
No, I
back
think
him
you're
up.
right.
And I'd like to back him up on that, absolutely. And I think what organisations don't look at the bottom line is the impact of someone working in isolation like that. And I think they have to look at how much more productive they might be if they did have some kind of face-to-face contact. They only look at in terms of, the office space and the heating and the lighting and all those kind of absolutely obvious costs. They don't look at the indirect costs, and the benefits that someone might get from being in an office.
I mean, I think that the technology enables some interesting combinations. For example, I was reading about some of this co-sharing stuff. So is it Lloyds or Barclays, I think, is letting out some of their redundant branch networks to bring in startups. Now, they're not then vacating, they're actually going back to sit in those environments because of the serendipity of startups talking to legacy businesses and what happens in terms of triggering new ideas.
I mean, going back to the early days of blogging networks, 2002, 2003 and so on, people used to say to us, well, you guys all just talk online, what's that about? But actually, we had to explain that we get many more opportunities for face-to-face contact, great meals, great conversations, great sort of hookups in any city you go to through that online interaction. And so the physical, the real world is still absolutely fundamental to how we get things done, but we create more opportunities for better conversations through the online interaction.
And
as well.
serendipity is still one of the cheapest ways of funding innovation.
How do you account for, is it largely a home-based workforce?
Yes, the vast majority are home-based. However, some of the challenges we faced in Result is by looking at different environments for different tasks. And you look at the impact of music on productivity. You look at the impact of lighting. We find that a formal environment suits decision making better. That often, hard top-level decision making is harder to do in a virtual setting for whatever reason. An informal environment. I think WeWork have this. Other companies, similar co-working areas, they have armchairs. Very good for a more relaxed conversation, for a bit more creativity. And then home working is that third option of, actually, I've got a call at 7 a.m. I don't want to commute in at 7 a.m. And it's ideal for me to have that flexibility of working at home. So it's actually, as we go through our working day, we generally do different tasks, and we need to provide that flexibility for people to be as productive as they can and effective as they can at each of those tasks by providing them with a variety of settings they can work in.
If we're going to hope for change, what's the benefit to the organisation? What's the benefit for their stakeholders, whoever they might be? And it doesn't matter what kind of organisation. In terms of all of these are great ideas, but actually it has to prove that it makes a better
And you'd say the
environment.
benefit can't just be cost reduction.
It can't just be, but sometimes that's what's driving it.
Yeah.
In terms of, and sometimes these days it's also about we've got to be seen to be more flexible to attract the right talent.
Which is not a cost benefit.
No,
Yeah,
but well, it has. I guess it is a benefit, isn't it? Because if we don't get the right talent, then we don't perform.
Well, of course. I know when I launched my first business in 1990 and I was working from home, you had to apologize. You didn't want anyone to know you were working from home. And then, 8, 9 years later, it was a badge of honor.
One more thing that I would like to add is that I absolutely still believe that it's both digital and physical worlds together. The way I also see it is face-to-face becoming a premium sometimes, meaning that so far maybe there was this meeting, the next meeting, the next meeting, a meeting, and maybe it was too many meetings together and finally you couldn't achieve anything. Now, because of technology, because we are becoming global, because we have the opportunity to work from home, creating face-to-face meetings becomes much more strategic, like today.
Great point.
Yeah.
And potentially more fun, more enjoyable.
Exactly,
Yeah.
more constructive as well, because you go to the meeting that you are prepared. Because you know
of technology and social.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and because you give a specific purpose.
Let's move on to the skill set, if we could. And obviously much is being said right now in the US about the importance of data as a skill set for the employee of the future. But how are people able to measure that effectively? And where are you seeing with your client engagements and in your own companies how this personalized data is being used? And then the last bit, as you plan for a future, where do you see the dominant business model? Is it going to be machine to machine, or will human to human ultimately dominate, or is there a third way?
So I think there's one of the big debates we have right now is about automation. And will we get automated away, or will we survive automation, and what are the skills required to survive automation? And it's an interesting debate because a lot of the attention is focused on low-end jobs, but actually I think one of the biggest sources of automation potential is the middle management that populate many of these large companies, and I'm sure IBM is completely different and has a wonderful middle management, but I'm sure you get my point, wink wink. And what's interesting there is that the optimum goal for data-led technology is not to replace people. I think the optimum goal is this idea of augmented human intelligence. Basically giving us a lift, giving us a platform where the things that we do uniquely, sort of judgment and intuition and sense making, they're much more powerful and much easier to achieve because we're standing on the data and we're standing on the tech platform. So I think that's a positive case for life in the age of algorithms, within the workplace. But it does mean that we need to quite urgently focus on the right sort of digital skills. So people who have a tolerance of ambiguity, people that can change and be agile, people that have confidence with technology, not necessarily experts as developers or data scientists, but willing to learn. All of that stuff is table stakes. That's an absolute must for employees today.
You've probably hit the nail on the head there with data, because we were quite, I don't know what
Ian,
it's,
yeah.
I don't know what it's like in the US, but last September, so we're now over 12 months into it, we're into the second academic year, where the government introduced coding at the age of 5. So some schools are actually teaching coding at the age of 5.
In reality, the tech is also changing the nature of work and the types of jobs. So as we lose jobs, we also create jobs. So if I'm born at the age of 6 now looking out, it probably looks no worse than if I was born in 1914 looking out at the world.
Particularly if you learn to code.
Precisely so.
But that's like learning a language, so that should be expected.
I think one of the things that we've got to look at is actually how can we help reskill those parts of this country. And should it happen in Ireland, I hope it doesn't, but we're seeing that here. And actually that's a real question about how do you bring digital skills into those environments that actually will enable them to actually regenerate.
Back to the point about training people is, if organisations could harvest more of what we do in our own time around a digital behaviour, that would be a very strong first step In other words, can we create a work environment to help support what I do naturally in my life? And I think there's more digital activity taking place between me and my smartphone than might be realised. And if you could take some of that then into business, I think we'd push the agenda forward.
Part 4 of our conversation, which is looking at the rewards and the incentives that will be permitted by technology, or that exists now. Is that where technology is going in terms of giving us reward?
Well, if we want this,
there's a work-life balance point there, because what's happened is that your working life has sort of bled outwards into your personal life through the use of devices and always on and so on and so forth. But the reverse needs to also happen. And it needs to happen not just from a humanitarian point of view, which is embracing more of the whole person, you know, whether it's flexibility for people with families or whether it's just doing some of your own social networking in the work context. Exactly as you say, you're quite right. Actually, people's personal use of the tools is the best learning opportunity they have to get into predictive analytics, into data, into online social networking and so on.
I absolutely agree with what you have just said, and I think that it can be also strictly related to rewards that we are talking about now. There was an interesting study conducted by Capita, UK organizations, that actually they have found that the benefit that have been delivered so far, currently, by UK organizations don't really meet anymore the requirement of the employees. And this is also driven by new technology. The reason is because, for example, we are all very familiar with the sites like Amazon, where we shop online our own stuff. And the same, for example, in terms of rewards and benefit, should be replicated inside the workplace. So not just giving a benefit as a package to everyone, but giving a tailored experience to employees, so they can go, for example, to the intranet site and to choose the benefit that can be more relevant for them, and also giving them the opportunity to change. For example, if I'm a woman and become a mother, maybe my benefit become more toward my family rather than other kind of benefit. So again, bringing this kind of understanding of the need of the people as consumers outside and bringing that inside the workplace through the use of new technology is definitely crucial for benefits and rewards.
But how about personalization? Is that part of the reward package? Is that providing the kind of recognition that Blaise is talking about? And you know, is that where that kind of data can be helpful?
I think so, and in all these discussions, of course, I don't want to push our IBM products, but that is kind of my job. Lately, and I don't know if you've heard about IBM Burst, but it does give you that personal experience and being able to highlight those that you do interact with more frequently than others, and then also being able to highlight those people that are on top of your list that you do communicate with most, either via interact with either same time, which is our internal interaction community, as well as our connections community, where we're able to highlight people and recognize them if they've done something special for you outside of their regular work. If they've helped you, maneuver through some of the processes of IBM, if they've helped you with some type of collateral piece that you might need for an event, or just if someone's being just genuinely nice and helpful. It's always nice to be recognized that way. And one of our reward systems within IBM is called Blue Thanks. And if you do give someone a Blue Thanks, it gives them a certain amount of points. They can go to the IBM store, purchase a t-shirt or whatever merchandise they'd like. It doesn't even have to be a logo merchandise. It could be anything. I got a coffee pot one time just because it was something that I needed and wanted. But it's nice to be recognized internally by your peers, by friends, co-workers that end up becoming your friends, essentially. And I think that a reward system is good. I mean, just like you would reward your children if they're doing something well. We get rewarded in school. by grades if you're achieving a certain goal. So I think a reward system or highlighting someone's achievements is a good thing.